Well, it's a delight to be with you, and especially, I must say, it's a delight to be in Hungary, in one of the few countries that actually was able to anticipate the gender ideology that I want to talk about here for the next few minutes, and actually to put in its constitution a statement saying that a father shall be male and a mother shall be female. That might strike you, that's a very sort of strange thing, that this would actually have to be articulated. These are truths that every human being in every time and place in every culture knows intuitively. You don't actually need to know biblical revelation to know that mothers are female and fathers are male. And yet it was absolutely essential that Hungary put that in the Constitution to provide at least some sort of legal resistance to this gender ideology that I want to describe here very briefly. And in particular, gender ideology's attack on human dignity. In fact, I would say that other than the attack on the unborn, on those at the beginning and at the end of life, gender ideology is the greatest assault and attack on human rights and human dignity with which we will have to deal, at least in the first half of the 21st century. So what is gender ideology exactly? Most Americans prior to 2015 actually would have had no idea what this was. It was only in 2015 in the United States that suddenly the media at once, simultaneously, bombarded our Twitter feeds and our Facebook pages and our news media with this idea of transgender. People had had a category of cross-dressing, of course, the idea of a man dressing like a woman for decades, a very sort of rare and unusual thing, but at least it was a clear concept in the public imagination. The idea of transgender, or of what we'll just call gender ideology, was a very, very new thing. So you can see how new this is in the United States. As recently as 2009, there was exactly one pediatric gender clinic in the entire United States. So this would be a clinic devoted to gender transition of teenagers. So starting with puberty blocking drugs and cross-sex hormones and continuing to cross-sex surgery and gender transition surgery. There was one of those in the United States in 2009. By 2019, there were over 100 of them in the United States. In a single decade in the United States, we have become awash everywhere with this ideology. And very often people don't quite realize just how radical it is. But in the US now, being imposed upon us, I would say, if you were to ask the average American, the vast majority of Americans would be absolutely opposed, as they are in Hungary, to gender ideology. But this is being imposed on us from above in the media and below, starting actually as young as kindergarten. So teaching 5- and 6-year-old kids these ideas, because everyone very quickly in a normal life develops the concept of male and female. Most people understand intuitively that humans are a sexually dimorphic species, as the biologists would say. We know this. And so to persuade people that this is not true, you have to get them very, very young. And most people don't quite realize just how radical gender ideology is. And so if you're going to boil this idea down to a single idea, at least as we would describe it in English, I would boil it down in this way. We have a concept, and the word we use in English, we have two words in English that we use to refer to more or less the same thing. Sex, which can refer both to the sex act, but also to this biological fact that humans are either male or female. And those correspond to the organization of our bodies for sexual reproduction. So there's a male organization that develops sperm, and sperm is a particular gamete that's small and mobile. And then there's a biological organization of the female body, which is oriented toward the production of eggs, or large, mostly immobile gametes. There are only two gametes. There are only two sexes corresponding to those. That's all there is, and we know this biologically. So the word sex in English refers to this basic, as Angela said, this ontological reality of male and female. It's something we don't impose upon reality. We don't imagine it. We observe it. We discover it as an ontological reality. Now that's the stable idea of sex. But we have another word in English, gender. Gender is roughly a synonym for English, but it can also refer to language, the gender pronoun for females or the gendered pronoun for males. But it can also be a synonym for sex. And in the United States and in the English-speaking world over the last 30 years or so, the word gender has come to be used predominantly so that you don't even use the word sex to describe male and female. You use the word gender. Now, anyone not paying attention would have thought, okay, there's nothing unusual about this. But what was actually happening simultaneous with this shift of language in which we use gender rather than sex exclusively is a completely different understanding of reality itself. So that gender is not merely a synonym for sex, but sex is dissolved and has been very, very quickly replaced with the concept of gender identity. So if sex is something that we observe, it's a biological reality, right, that we simply account for. Gender identity is an entirely subjective understanding inside your head of your gender. So the very definition of this idea is circular, unfortunately. So you have this subjective idea that's independent of your sexed body, so that your body doesn't have any kind of fundamental meaning about who you are. And as a result of this, because everyone has a different gender identity, the only way you can know someone's gender identity is by asking them. So this is the reason now, at least in English, people are putting pronouns in their bios on Twitter and on Facebook to tell people what their gender identity is. Well, that makes sense if it's an entirely internal thing. It's this entirely subjective thing. And this is the thing that I think folks often don't realize about how radical this is. I could show you how radical this is by showing you two images that are used. These are designed for young school children to introduce them to gender ideology. That is to catechize, to inculcate, to indoctrinate children in this ideology. Now, in the United States, we have these popular Christmas cookies called gingerbread men. And so this is a cookie, I don't know if you have this in Hungary or in the Spanish-speaking world, you have gingerbread men, this popular cookie. And so this gingerbread person, this is a play on words, not a gingerbread cookie, but a genderbread person, as a way of describing this idea to children. And so notice, if you can read the diagram, rather to replace children's thinking in terms of male and female, the purpose of this diagram is to say, think of people in terms of four different things. There's the identity, which is in your head, or you can identify it with your brain. There is attraction, which refers to your emotional and sexual attraction. There's your expression, which describes the way you speak, the way you dress and present yourself. And then finally, there's your sex, and that's the biological category. And these, notice you can see on the diagram, can exist in every case along a spectrum. Now, this is how this was described about 7 or 8 years ago. But gender ideologues very quickly attacked the genderbread person because they said it didn't describe the reality accurately. Now, can you guess what the problem would be with this diagram? As I described gender ideology, notice I told you gender ideology replaces biological sex with a subjective idea of gender identity. And so notice that the key problem is the idea of biological sex. Notice this, biological sex. This implies that there's still a biological reality. There's also the problem that the gingerbread person looks a lot like a man, all right? And so the gingerbread person was actually replaced with something much more in keeping with gender ideology, the gender unicorn. Now here's what I want you to see the difference between the gingerbread person and the gender unicorn. First of all, notice the gender unicorn is not a male or female. The gender unicorn is androgynous. It's purple, of course. Notice it no longer has a brain. It just has a thought, just a subjective thought of a rainbow. So we're now completely detached from biology, and we're inside the kind of immaterial thinking of the gender unicorn. But notice what has happened to biological sex. Biological sex has been replaced with gender. The arrow is not pointed in the right spot, but gender assigned at birth. So just as you have an entirely subjective idea of your gender, So there's no longer biological sex. There is simply sex or gender assigned at birth. Also an entirely social phenomenon. So that sex has now been completely dissolved, the meaning of the body has been completely dissolved and replaced with an entirely subjective and social constructionist idea of gender identity. This is the profoundly radical ideology that allows it to be possible for males to compete against females in high school and college sports, and that makes it possible now in the United States for the proper standard of care for children with gender dysphoria to be not training them and helping them to become comfortable with their sex bodies, but to transform their body to conform it to a gender identity that is entirely independent of their body. So we are now at war, not simply with God, not simply with human rights, but with human biology itself, with, as Angela said, ontological realities. And we are going to have to make a beachhead. We are going to have to defend, if we are going to defend human rights and human dignity, we are going to have to defend the fact that human beings come in two fundamental and complementary forms, male and female. This is a very depressing reality. It's washing not just across the United States, but across every international institution, including the European Union, the OAS, the UN, and now the highest corridors of power in Washington, D.C. and the White House. Nevertheless, I am absolutely optimistic that if we work together, we work with common cause, if we are as wise as serpents and innocent as doves, that we can defeat this ideology, because it is so fundamentally contrary to human reason and so fundamentally contrary to nature. So as dark as this ideology is, despite the fact that most of the fighting is still ahead of us, I'm absolutely convinced that if we work together, we can defend it. Thank you very much.